Jake Hatch, someone we've gotten to know over the last 4 years, covers Utah and also BYU. BYU will start their workouts practices on Wednesday, but Utah today. Jake with KSL Sports Zone joins us on 365 Sports. Jake, thank you very much for your time as always. I believe you and I, when we were on the phone as I was headed to the studio, mentioned that there were some assistant coaches available, maybe some interesting nuggets, anything other than what normally is the first day of practice and access?
Well, I guess the biggest thing to take away from their availability today that I've added is that these coaches are very confident in this Utah squad. I had a chance to talk with a number of the assistants, and we don't get to talk to them all that often. It's about twice during training camp to catch up with them. And Luther Ellis, Lewis Powell, and a couple of other assistant coaches all express that they believe that their respective position groups are the deepest they've ever had at Utah, and they think that it will contribute to Utah being as good as maybe they've ever been if they enter the Big 12 this fall.
Jake, what was the reaction to Morgan Scalley for the second time being promoted to head coach in waiting? And what I mean, I guess, is that sort of starting a ticking clock in some people's minds that Kyle Whittingham's not long for this world?
I do think that there is a timeline, yes, that a lot of people are envisioning of how long Kyle Whittingham is going to be on the job. I think it absolutely has caused that clock to begin ticking. Now, does that happen after this season? Has that happen 3 years from now? I think it was a very natural thing for Utah to designate Morgan Scalley once again as his successor. I think it will ensure that they continue to be able to have that stability on the coaching staff, obviously keep the continuity there when it comes to recruiting. But it's not a big surprise to anybody up here in Utah that he's been designated as the successor. But yes, the clock is ticking now as to how long Kyle Whittingham is going to be head coach at Utah.
All right, he has been so consistent and probably has had some really, really good teams. What do you think? He seems like he's 20 years younger than his age. Do you think some of the changes in college football, like the realignment, he's even said to us twice that, hey, we're not done. There's more changes to come. Do you feel like it's that, or you just feel like it's time maybe in the next 2 or 3 years to move on?
I think so. I think he realizes that he has kind of run his course. Now, if you guys weren't aware, this will be his 30th year at Utah, both as an assistant defensive coordinator and obviously as the head coach of the University of Utah football program. There are not many coaches in the sport of college football who are able to enjoy 30 years at the same university and have coached like Kyle Whittingham has. It's been an incredible run. I just think he sees that he's going to be 65 soon. His father passed away relatively young in his early to mid-60s, so he's kind of, I think, looking at the thing saying, you know what, maybe I want to spend some extra time with my grandkids and my family and enjoy the good life. He's made a lot of money as a head coach, obviously, so he's not hurting for cash at all. So, yeah, I do think he's looking at maybe some of the changes on the horizon and saying, you know what, maybe it's time for me to step aside and let a younger coach take the reins here.
Jake, as you know, a lot of the focus, especially for those like us that are covering on a more regional or national basis, we're not in the nitty-gritty, in the weeds like someone as yourself is on a daily basis with Utah. So we're talking, big picture stories are Cam Rising returning from health. How healthy is he? But what is something that is a bit more in the weeds and detailed about this Utah team that not a lot of people are talking about, but that you find to be one of the more important topics about this team?
How deep and talented their defense is, particularly their defensive front. They've got legitimately guys, I think 6 defensive tackles alone that I think are NFL caliber guys. And that obviously is going to lend itself to them being extremely physical and extremely tough to run the football on. They have the same thing, similar situation at defensive end. I think that defensive line is a hallmark of what Kyle Whittingham's tenure at Utah has been, is they've just traditionally pushed out defensive linemen who are NFL ready, but it's about as deep and talented a defensive front as I can remember in my 15 years in sports radio here in Salt Lake City. And if they are really that talented on the defensive front, it's going to lend itself to the linebacking core and the defensive secondary being that much better, because they don't have to necessarily worry as much about having to rush the passer with extra blitzing players.
Do they let Cam Rising loose, or do they still kind of like have him in bubble wrap?
Are you talking in practice, or are we talking in game?
Well, I mean, in games you got to go, right? I mean, there's
Sure.
no question they got to let him go full throttle, and sometimes you get hurt if you don't go full throttle.
Yeah, Andy Ludwig spoke to the media today, and we asked him a similar question to that. And he said, you know what, we're going to try and make sure that he is as protected as we can make him in practice. But there's just an element to being able to go out there and do the things you do as a quarterback, to go out there and make plays. And that's exactly what Cam is. He described him as a playmaker. And they said they were going to coach him up to say, hey, you got to be maybe a little bit smarter, because he suffered 2 really debilitating knee injuries at Utah that have really hampered his time there. They're coaching him up saying, hey, you've got playmakers at tight end, at wide receiver. You got some good running backs behind you and an offensive line that looks very, very talented. Get the ball into the hands of your playmakers. It doesn't have to be all on you all the time. Yes, there's going to be times that he's going to obviously tuck it and run, but they're saying that they're going to be very judicious with regards to getting him hit in practice, and more particularly calling quarterback design runs and the like.
Jake, between the transfer portal and just traditional recruiting, who do you feel is the most important new face on the roster this season?
Well, that's a good question. I would say you've got a pair of freshman tackles, offensive tackles, Caleb Lomu and Spencer Fano, who both got experience last year, but they're going to really, I think, emerge into their own this year. You don't traditionally see 2. I know that they're going to designate, I think, Lomu as a redshirt freshman. I think Fano might be the same class. They didn't play a ton last year due to some injuries and other things, but when you have the confidence to start 2 guys at offensive tackle who are redshirt freshmen or sophomores at the oldest, that means you have got a lot of talent, you believe, on that offensive front, particularly on the outside, because those guys have to exist on an island and go up against some of the best pass rushers in the entire country. We all know that the Big 12 got some very, very good pass rush specialists across this league. So I think those 2 offensive linemen, I know they're not necessarily official newcomers to this team, but keep an eye on those 2 tackles, Caleb Lomu and Spencer Fano.
Is there any doubt that of the 4 schools that have moved into the Big 12, and I think it's official August the 1st later on this week or sometime that first couple of days in August, that Utah is separated, well separated from Arizona because of the questions in the coaching change, even with Fafita and McMillan back, et cetera, and then Arizona State, and then Colorado, the unknown, because we just don't know how much they've improved?
Yeah, I think you absolutely nailed it. I think Utah, they're far and away the most accomplished and obviously designated as the favorite in the Big 12, according to that media poll that came out ahead of Big 12 Media Days. They are the class of the newcomers, obviously. Arizona, number 2. I would say Colorado, 3, because you are saying it's a little bit of a wild card. We don't know what we're going to get with Coach Prime, but there's a lot of confidence there in Boulder that he's going to be better in year 2 with the Buffaloes. And then, Arizona State, I think it's an uphill climb still for them down in the desert, but don't be surprised if Kenny Dillingham in the next 2 or 3 years really emerges with a pretty good team, but you have to give him the time to get his guys in place. We
know that there's been a little fun back and forth between Utah fans resistant about the move to the Big 12 and, the other side of the Big 12 fandom of you're lucky to be here and all of that. And a lot of that's just kind of having fun, Jake. But what is kind of the feel, for better or worse, from the Utah fan base as we start to get a month out from the season and you start to actually get ready for playing some games? Are people excited about it? Are they hesitant? How would you describe the mood around the Utes and being in the Big 12 this year?
I think Utah fans are excited to be the favorite in the conference. They want to come in and make a statement, obviously. And yes, there's been that back and forth between the fan bases on social media. Everybody's seen it out there. But I think the overarching theme I have sensed from Utah fans, both online and also people that I know in my day-to-day life, is that they're excited to be part of the Big 12. They believe that they should be and will be the favorites to win the Big 12 title this year. They're hoping to go to the college football playoff, and if they accomplish all those goals, I think the Utah fan base would be very happy and content members of the Big 12 Conference.
So we mentioned Scally. Craig brought that up, and we know that he had been kind of ready for that earlier, and then they had to wait a little bit, kind of a downtime. Tell us more about Morgan Scally that maybe most people don't know too much about.
Morgan Scally is about as Utah man as you're going to find. He grew up a Utah guy, played there, was an all-conference safety for the Utes, then went into coaching, and he's been coaching Utah the entire time he's been a coach. I'm telling you, if you want a like-for-like replacement as much as you possibly can get with Kyle Whittingham at Utah, it's Morgan Scally. He bleeds red, quite literally, and he will put on for that university, unlike many people will. It's kind of a similar situation to what Kalani Sitake is at BYU. Kalani grew up a BYU fan, played for Lavelle Edwards in Provo, and then the whole venture he made in his coaching career was to get where he's at right now as the head coach at BYU. So assuming when Morgan Scalley ascends to the top job there at Utah, you're going to have two of the best alums from these respective universities going head-to-head. And, yeah, Morgan Scalley, he is as Utah a man as you are going to find out there.
It's football season, basically, Jake, with all the practices beginning, 16 schools in the Big 12, just the 3 today. In your opinion, of the schools among the 16, give me a team that perhaps you think is in the middle of the pack that has the best chance of, when we get to mid-November, late November, playing for the Big 12 championship, if a lot of things go well.
If things go well, watch out for UCF, I think. I think with KJ Jefferson at quarterback, I think with Gus Malzahn's offense, they've got a lot of things going for them. Now, the question mark for UCF is that defense. Ted Roof takes over as the defensive coordinator. It might be co-defensive coordinator, but he comes in with a lot to prove on the defensive side of the football. But I think that UCF offense, if things break the way that they could, that could be an offense that can score with anybody. Now, they may give up some points along the way as well, but it would not surprise me if UCF gets off to a hot start. You could see that carry on. And obviously with BYU and Utah both traveling down there to Orlando to take on the Knights, they're going to be a player when it comes to the Big 12 race.
Thank you, Jake. Appreciate your time. KSL Sports Zone, both Utah, BYU. We had them on, of course, when they changed in football coaches at Utah State. Jake Katz with us on 365 Sports. I like